His team sergeant was killed. He's defended the body, killed 20-some people on ISR. His team took 7 hours. They had to fight through to get to him. They finally did danger close, got to him. He was knocked out twice, black on ammo. There is no, like, a movie would be made and it would be amazing.
Right.
But to guys that have gone through it, like, I no desire to ever get that. And he's like, I got a piece of 10 for the worst day of my life.
All right, so Nick, thanks for joining.
Oh, dude, this has been some time in the works.
Tried to maybe make this happen this past winter a little bit. You were kind of in the area, but it didn't quite work out. So you were actually, I think you guys were doing a little training or something, kind of up close to where I grew up, Ovando or something like that.
Yeah, we were outside of Helena, somewhere in that area. Yeah. They just tell us where to go, and we head that way and carry things. We
actually met down at Winter Strong this year at Bert Soren's. It's actually cool. Bert Soren's actually going to be here tonight.
No kidding.
Yeah. He's flying in here at like 3 or something.
Nice.
Yeah. So he's one of the, we're going to record one with him tonight, and then we're going to hang out and barbecue and then head down to TAC tomorrow. So.
Nice. I don't think we'll be able to stick around for that. We're in the middle of this road trip.
Yeah.
We're day 6. Got my daughter here with me.
Yeah.
The other one's out in the car, as teenagers do.
She's giggling because she's got these headphones on. Can hear her dad's voice in her ears. Kind of weird, huh?
She's excited that this goes on YouTube, and all of her heroes are on YouTube. So
yeah, you're going to be famous.
Everybody from your school will know that you're here.
So what's your road trip consist of? Where'd you start, and what's the path?
Started off in Colorado Springs. Hit Telluride. Beautiful place. The weather did not cooperate, so they didn't really get to see anything. Then into Salt Lake. We were in Yellowstone today, up here seeing you, and then we're going to hit Bozeman tonight, and then off to see Mount Rushmore, and then traveling kind of across the Midwest. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
To see family, and then finally back to Colorado.
That's a heck of a trip.
Yeah, we're halfway through.
I loved it's kind of something we always take kind of like one big trip a year, and this year we're not doing it, but we've done it for the last, I don't know how many years. One of my favorite things to do is just to get in and drive a long ways and go see different parts of our kind of North America, because we've gone up into Canada and stuff. But a couple of years ago, we went down to Zion Park and did a bunch of hiking down there and checked all that out.
Beautiful area. Beautiful.
Yeah, I love taking the kids and actually showing them our country, showing them all the different places that it's an amazing place. We all think about going on vacations to other countries or warm places or whatever, but like just within, 12, 14 hours of here, that's a big circle. There's a lot of cool stuff.
This country that we have has so many different things.
Yeah.
If you think say you live in Germany, you can get something of what we have, right here in Montana.
Yeah.
But you can't get what we have in the South, the Southwest.
Right.
You can't get the beaches that we have down in Florida, or the diverse beaches that you get in, from California to New York.
Yeah.
Or the flatlands that we have. That this country has such an amazing landscape to it that just exploring it is breathtaking.
It really is. And a lot of states are similar to Montana in the way that they have just a ton of variation just in their own state. With Montana, we've got western Montana and mountains and lakes and all that stuff. And then out east, it's ranch land and open prairie ground, farm ground. And, quite frankly, as freaking screwed up as the people have made California is probably the most beautiful state that we have. I mean, you drive to the top of Donner Pass and you start dropping off Donner Pass and all those foothills and all that. And then you got the redwood forests and all that stuff and wine country. And then you get to the beaches and
absolutely. And the beach is right there. And you can go from skiing to surfing in the same day if you really
crazy.
Want to.
Yeah. It's a shame that the animal species of humans have ruined it so bad.
We ruined so many things.
Yeah.
That's we were sitting in Yellowstone yesterday.
Yeah.
And just the line of traffic. And then when you understand how little people travel, and as beautiful as Yellowstone is, and the diverse amount of, of livestock, I guess you could say they're there because they're corralled, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get it that they're wild, but they're caged in and they're used to humans, so they might as well be livestock. But you see this line of cars and they stop to look at bison and hold up everybody, and they'll stop for 5 minutes so that they can take pictures.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with like traffic accidents on the highway. Like, got it, folks. Like
Yeah.
it's something to see, but let's keep moving along. We have things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, especially around the entrances when they see the first buffalo, you know.
Man.
It's like once they get in a ways and they've seen a few hundred, it starts to get a little better. But yeah, it's crazy. And I actually, I've had to force myself to actually go to Yellowstone, because if you can just take the people out of it, it's a mind-boggling place. It's mind-boggling. And actually, when my kids were like your daughter's age here and even younger, when I was kind of freshly divorced and I took my kids on a couple trips, we went down there and we did kind of the first come, first serve camping thing. We headed in there at like 4:30 in the morning.
Right.
And we kind of lurked around the campground like we were like some creeper around a playground, because you're like waiting for a camper to like pack up and leave.
Yep.
To get their spot, and you're kind of watching them, but you're trying to not like watch them like in a creepy way. And then you'd see somebody walk into like the bathroom and you'd ask them like, are you guys leaving today? Because that's kind of way that first come, first serve thing works down there.
It's the wilderness version of Black Friday parking.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. But we'd get a camp spot, and then I would take the kids and we'd go drive around. And, you know, I was trying to just get the kids to understand, like, when you're walking around all those steaming little, you know, fizzes coming out of the hill, out of the ground, and the mud pots and all this different stuff. I'm like, you're standing on a volcano, like an active volcano. It's mind-boggling.
Huge volcano. I was trying to explain it to my daughters how big it is, and it would essentially stretch from the bottom of Denver to the north of Colorado Springs in terms of size.
Yeah.
And there's these talks of this thing erupts, what happened 70,000 years ago when it went off, and like, we don't survive that. No, there's nothing that we can do in, you know, all of our green energy talk that prevents a act of Mother Nature like that from taking you out. Yeah,
it's mind boggling, and then to watch Old Faithful, I'm sure you guys probably saw it, but you know, to think about how that goes off that accurately on that time schedule for however long it's been going off, it's just mind boggling. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's really cool about taking them on these trips is I don't subscribe to the let's go to a theme park. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll go see them, but let's go see what this place has to offer, not what somebody's imagination says you should pay for. Yep. And as fun as roller coasters are, they have their place. You know, it's kind of scary to do that drop. Well, let's go push your thoughts on what is scary or what you can handle. It's so much cooler to get out and say, you know, her and I were walking in a stream yesterday, ice cold. You know, she lost her sandals. I go chasing after them. My sandals come off. I cut my foot open.
Did you laugh at your dad when he was doing that? Yeah, I bet.
She very much was. I think she kicked him off on purpose.
No. Yeah.
But you don't get that really anywhere else. You can't go to Six Flags or SeaWorld and say, all right, Dad, let's hold hands and walk down this ice-cold river that is, you know, just in a breathtakingly beautiful place. You can't find that. You can't pay enough money to some park to create that. And that's the stuff why we're on this road trip, why we continue to go out and camp in the mountains and do such random things, is because I want them to see this country. I want them to see what it is that I've deployed so many times to defend, and what my brothers have died for. This beautiful place that we have, this country that is so amazing, can't be found in the confines of a man-made park.
No, 100%. And my kids have never been to a theme park, or I don't know if they went with their mom or not. I don't think so, but I've never taken them to Disneyland or Disney World or whatever. And you know, they've been to some cities and stuff like that. But I agree 100%. And back then, when I was taking those kids camping, we were doing the tent camping out of the truck and stuff like that. And you are sleeping in grizzly bear country, and there is a small amount of risk involved with some of that stuff, but it's more of that excitement. And it's interesting. And I've said this before, it's what I love so much about taking my kids hunting. Mm-hmm. Hunting takes you to places that you would never, ever go. Like, even on this trip that you're taking, there's some places still that you won't go with your kids on vacation, because there's not really much of a point to necessarily go there. Mm-hmm. But for example, I always use this like deep into the Missouri River breaks. It's kind of off the beaten path, and it's not really a quote unquote touristy spot. Mm-hmm. But it's got a ton of history, right? It's where Lewis and Clark rode their boat upriver through that country, and it's where, you know, the Indians lived and the bison and all that stuff. And it's super broken, unbelievably rough and beautiful country. but it's off the beaten path, you know, north of Jordan, Montana, where no one knows where that is unless you're from Montana. And I always tell my kids when we're out hunting, that exact thing. I tell them, like, one, you live in a country where you have the freedom, and you live in a state where you just have the privilege to just drive 6 or 8 hours from home and hunt in places like that, and hike around and have the freedom to own a gun and hunt and pursue animals and all those things that come with hunting, and then sit there on a mountaintop glassing looking for deer. All the while I'm looking at I'm just like mind boggled by how beautiful it is. And I'm also trying to imagine what it was like in the 1500s, the 1700s, you know. And then as settlers came out west in the 1800s. And I always talk to my kids about that, and the fact that guys like yourself and your brothers, guys like Andrew, that sacrifice so much to give us the freedom to do all that. And it's, I still can't even wrap my mind around it. The older I get, the more sentimental I get towards that stuff, the more of that feeling I have. And I wish, what makes me the saddest is I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, you are a part of a tiny, tiny percentage of the globe that will ever get to do this. And there's millions of people that would die to come out to Montana and go on a bear hunt or an elk hunt or deer, or just on a hike. Forget the even hunting part of it. And these are kids that are born and raised in apartment buildings in New York City and, you know, these big, big places, and they don't get the chance to go out and do this stuff. And I think the world would be a lot different place if a lot of these kids and adults that were raised in places like that got one time to come out and see the beauty and the power of all that. I think they'd go back to their cities and have a whole different perspective.
I don't even think it's necessarily cities. You know, I grew up in Iowa, middle of, or I should say the outskirts of a decent size for Iowa, about 50,000 people. And, you know, it's deer country. There are 200-pound bucks walking around there. Right. And you don't know that as a kid growing up, that is something that's, you know, sought after, that Midwest bucks are a prize. And then I get to my first duty station, and it was in Alaska. Okay. Fairbanks, Alaska. I was in the 172nd Striker Brigade. And I couldn't stay in Fairbanks. I was in the mountains every weekend. Yeah. I finally got to see what these massive mountains were, and it spoke to my heart. It was my soul felt at home, if you will. And I can't imagine living without being in the mountains now, like where my house actually is. It's one thing to travel, but it's another thing to sit on a peak and look at another one and say, man, that's breathtaking. And actually in selection, the Army Special Forces selection I went through, you have to take psych evals to get in. And I remember I got called in after, and the guy says, hey, you know, normally we understand that people that want to come to this profession are they're a little crazy, you know. Yeah. But let's take a mountain, for instance. Let's say, you know, right at tree line, you know, right where the trees end and the snow really stays. That's the upper edge of crazy that we like. And I was like, okay. And he goes, but you're way up here. Like, you're above the peak, man. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm that crazy. Yeah. And he goes, well, let's look at some of your questions. And in one of them, he says, you know, it says, do you ever feel like you have visions? Like things aren't real? And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. And he's like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, well, first off, I'm not seeing burning bushes. Yeah. Like, that's not what I'm getting after. I mountain climb a lot. And when you're sitting on one mountaintop and you're looking across, you know, 15 miles to the next one, it looks like a painting. That doesn't look real. You know, you can't reach out and touch it. It's not right. It's almost not corporeal, if you will. This is, how do I get to that thing? So life doesn't seem real when you're sitting on this peak and looking at that one. And he was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. He asked me a couple other ones, and I had completely different
clarify
answers. But yeah, I guess I'm not as crazy as they thought I was. Yeah. They let me in, obviously, but
it is interesting you say that about. I had never been to Ohio until just last year, and I flew into Chicago and then drove kind of out through Iowa and into Ohio and whatnot. And people come here and they're always kind of amazed by our mountains. And I grew up here. Yep. And I look at our mountains as a bit of a fraud because I've been like to the Canadian Rockies and like even down around Denver, you know, and I've seen like the big Rockies. And so I'm always like, our mountains are kind of pathetic. Well, driving across Iowa and Ohio and whatnot and being out there for a few days like I was, and it all looks kind of the same, like just that highway just kind of keeps going. You can only see like, you see it just a couple miles, but it's always just like there's trees and there's kind of rolling hills and stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, like, it kind of it's beautiful in its own way, but it all kind of looks the same. Mm-hmm. But when you're driving around Montana, even in the areas like ours that our mountains aren't necessarily the most majestic, every mile or two is different. Mm-hmm. Everything's different. There's a feature, a river, a mountain, whatever, that's, maybe a wide open space where there's just a valley. And but every 10 miles is vastly different from the 10 before. And I was like, okay, now I'm starting to understand, like, a lot of these people that grow up in the Midwest, a lot of my family's from southeast Colorado and Kansas. Mm-hmm. And it's just wheat fields.
And there's nothing out there. And Iowa has the second most road miles of any state in the U.S. because everything's broken into a 1 mile by 1 mile cornfield grid. Yeah. And it's wonderful as a kid growing up because there's not a cop for miles around. And the amount of trouble I got into speeding in cars and the dumb stuff that I did, it helped me hone, stuff that I do for the race team now for driving and the understanding of mechanics and whatnot. I grew up in a family of mechanics. But the windy roads of some of these valleys, man, getting on a motorcycle, you can't touch your phone. You can't because actively driving a motorcycle requires you to have both hands on the controls, and just getting lost in those mountains is next to none.
Danny Bolton and I this morning in the kitchen, we were talking about feeling kind of bad for kids these days because they're not quite growing up. Like the things that we did as kids, like I just wouldn't let my kids do today, and I think every generation's kind of that way. But I talked about taking my dirt bike, living up in Lincoln, outside of Helena there, and no cell phone coverage. Mm-hmm. No, there were no inReaches back then, none of that. Leave at 8 a.m. and go ride with my buddies in the mountains all day. And the only rule was like be back by dark. Mm-hmm. But then, like, we would literally get lost at times. Like, you're riding a dirt bike and you're flying around on these logging roads and you're cutting up this one to that one. And then pretty soon it's like time to head home and you're running these roads and you're like, oh, that's a dead end. And this is a dead end. And like, you're like, how did we even get in here? And sometimes show up like well after dark. Of course, parents are like all upset and worried and pissed off that and it's like, but we ripped around in the mountains all the time doing stuff. And to grow up being able to do that stuff, it definitely was dangerous and we got away with it and got lucky that we kind of survived it, but it was such an amazing amount of freedom, and I actually told Danny this morning, we left early this morning and ran up about 45 minutes from here. And my son bought his first little pickup. Like you'll see it here, a little red Ford Ranger. It's got like 200,000 miles on it. And I think he paid $4,800 for it, but he's in driver's ed right now, currently, as we speak. But all he wants is a way to get into the mountains. Mm-hmm. As soon as he has his license, when we were talking about vehicles that he wants, he's like, I don't care what it looks like. I just want to get into the mountains because he loves to go hunt. And he killed a bear right back here behind the house last year by himself. Just hiked out there and killed a bear with his bow. But that's right here in the river bottom, right by our house. He just wants his own way to get into the mountains like I was able to do when I was a kid.
Dude, there's something magical about being in them, especially without cell phone service. It's almost like a call to your lineage, if you will. You find your soul. You find who you are out there. And maybe there's something to what the Native American lore about going on spirit walks and whatnot. Like being out there where you have to rely on yourself and there's something about it.
And you actually do also learn how small and somewhat incapable you are too. Like you think you're this badass, and like we just took Derek Wolf on a bear hunt. I mean, he played in the NFL for 10 years or however long it was. He's a freaking savage. He's a giant. He's a Viking. And we just hunted for the last 5 days down in the Bitterroot. And those mountains are steep and aggressive. Mm-hmm. And I think it was kind of eye-opening to them of like, it's one thing to do it for a day, but then it's like the next day and then the next day, and it starts to stack on top of it. And you realize like how much it takes to get to one peak. And then you sit on the top and you glass and you realize that like, oh, there's maybe a bear 3 miles away, but there's 4 peaks between us in these giant valleys. And it makes you realize like, and then you watch these elk just run up the other side and disappear down. And it makes you realize how soft you are compared to a lot of the other animals that are running around in those woods.
Yeah, we absolutely are. And there's this myth, and we run into this a lot when special operations guys get out of the military. The lore is that a special operations guy can do anything better than you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. We're really good at a couple different things, but then we're basically a little above average than your normal person at most things. And we go out and we deal with people, and they're like, "Oh man, I beat a special operations guy." Well, yeah, calm down, man. This isn't This isn't my niche. This isn't the thing that I train for. I'm really good at going into a house, closing with the enemy, and killing him before that he has the chance to do it. Or I'm really good at going to a foreign environment that I've never been into, picking up a language and dealing with locals.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really good at. Hey, I picked up a random rock and I was able to bounce it off something and hit, a moving object. Sorry, I haven't trained for that. That's not what we do.
Well, I've noticed that even with some veterans with hunting, with actually hunting animals. Mm-hmm. Like that's a different kind of hunting that you guys actually do. I mean, dealing with the wind and smell and animal behavior and understanding habitat and where they live. And, a lot of veterans do get out, and I think they love it because I think, like you say, I think some people just think like, oh, you just would be automatically good at this. And it's like, no, there's a ton of behavior that you have to learn about these animals. And what you do have probably is the fitness and the mental toughness to maybe stay out there and do it. But there's so much to learn. And then you also realize how much more difficult those animals can be than people, from the standpoint that they've been avoiding predators for their entire existence. Yeah. And they're so tuned in. And it's amazing. Like we were talking about the smell portion of like a bear. Right. And where we were hunting and the wind was a little bit wrong. And it's like that bear could be a half a mile from here and be gone right now and smell us. Like if that's a person that you're looking for, like they have no idea you're around.
Yeah.
Like, we're so dumbed down to our senses compared. And it makes me actually wonder. I was talking with a buddy of mine last year. I wonder if the cavemen had that, like a super heightened sense of smell that we've just lost.
Yeah.
Hearing, vision, smell. Like I wonder what the first people, what their senses were, if they were super elevated compared to us, or if they weren't, and it's why we had to use our brains and develop other ways of staying alive and also hunting. But
I think there's something to be said for you being in the moment with it, the amount of time that you have to do something. And, an example, when I'm shooting my rifle, I can tell you when I'm getting really close within 2 or 3 bullets that I need to do a magazine change just by feel alone. You give it to an average person that doesn't touch a firearm, the chances that they're going to notice the difference between, 20 rounds versus, 5 rounds in there, maybe, but it's something so new to them. So what's to say that skill isn't there? The amount of times that we've been stalking in the woods and you're like, something's watching me right now.
Right.
What is it? I don't know. I don't know if we ever had or would know what it is, but something out there is looking at me, and our spidey senses, if you will, go off.
And that shit's real. It's real. I mean, and I don't care if it's in the military, if you're just out hunting deer, that feeling that comes over you. I mean, it's happened to me where it comes over you and you get goosebumps and your hair stands up in a crazy way where you're like, there is something weird that's going on right now for no apparent reason. I'm not scared to be in the woods, but there's been times where I'm like, you just get this feeling that's like crazy powerful that you
get it on patrol too. Like you're out, you're walking into a place and you'll see the body language of everybody change. Nobody will say anything on the radio. There might get a guy popping up and be like, hey, I don't like what's going on, but everybody changes their posture. And
interesting.
Something is weird. Something's going on. We don't know. And I would say probably 6 out of 10 times you hit contact.
Yeah.
Whether it's an IED or somebody takes a shot at you or something.
Right.
It's on.
It's real. Yeah. What, so you grew up in Ohio, you said?
Iowa.
What'd your family do? Like, what was your upbringing like?
Family of blue collar workers. Almost everybody was a mechanic, and worked in some kind of mechanic field.
Okay.
My dad was the lead technician for a leather tanning facility. So they made all the leather for GM.
Oh, really?
Which we couldn't afford a car that had leather in it, but I knew what it was.
Yeah.
Grew up outside cornfields. running around. I remember you were talking about this, about coming back when it was dark. I got in a big argument with my dad, and I went storming out of the house. And we backed right up to a creek, and we had hundreds of acres behind us. We weren't the farmers, but it's just where the little co-op community, if you will, was. And I came home hours later, and I asked my dad, I was like, "Why didn't you come after me?" And he goes, "Where are you going to go?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you're going to come back. I know you are. And that's what I used to do. I used to wake up, and I remember I'd pack a lunchbox with nothing close to nutritious.
Yeah.
Throw it in a backpack, steal the dog's chain from around the tree, and I would use that, and I would just walk the creek for hours.
Really?
And I would throw the chain around a tree, and I'd climb out and just explore, and be the kid with imagination.
Yeah.
And then made it into the Army at 17. Didn't think I had a big future in anything, and I knew I didn't want to stay in a small town in Iowa.
So that's why you joined, just wanted to get out?
Yeah, get out and do something. I knew we couldn't afford college. I didn't think I would get a scholarship for anything. Was kind of mistaken in some ways. I had a pretty breakout football season my senior year.
Yeah.
I got contacted by a couple of universities. My recruiter, bless his heart, definitely didn't lie to me and tell me that I could leave the delayed entry program. And ultimately just went into the military, went 11 Bravo, right out, went to airborne school, and then got assigned to the 172nd when they were transitioning to become a striker brigade.
So what made you choose the Army?
I was in the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, the JROTC program. Those were
Okay.
only reserved for the best of high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And that just seemed like the option. I didn't have really a draw to be on the water. The Air Force didn't seem like something that I wanted to do. And I thought I was smart enough to not be a Marine. Which to all my Marine friends out there, I love Marines. We line up so well in so many things. We just give them flack for far more.
Did you know right away? I mean, when you were going in, it sounds like you kind of had that path where you wanted to head straight into Special Forces. And
I didn't even know what Special Forces was. I knew what a Ranger was. I tried 3 different times to go to I think it was RIP, the Ranger Indoctrination Program, right out of basic training, and go to Ranger Battalion. But the unit I was going to, the 172nd Striker Brigade, was going to be the second striker unit in the military. That was a priority. So 3 different times I got told, no, you can't do that. You have to go to Alaska. It wasn't until I went to JRTC, which is down at Fort Polk, Louisiana. It's the Joint Readiness Training Center. And I'm driving around. I'm in the back of a striker. I have all the gear in the world on, the miles gear, the face paint, the body armor. It's middle of the summer. I'm sweating, and I look over and I see a Humvee, a couple Humvees parked, and there's guys in just these little short shorts, the Ranger panties, big beards, laying out tanning. And I remember I hit the guy next to me, and I was like, who are they? What are they doing? And he's like, oh, that's probably, 5th group guys or something like that. And I was like, what is 5th group guys? I don't. And I remember questioning him, and I was like, they're doing something more fun than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So I was kind of dumb. I didn't know this rule, but don't tell people what your plans are before they're enacted, especially in the military.
Yeah.
So I was a private first class, told my platoon sergeant, hey, I want to go Special Forces. We have to be a specialist. And he's like, oh, cool. Right on, man. So I didn't get promoted until my 26th month in the military, which is 2 months after you're supposed to automatically become an E4, but it was within the 90-day window that HRC, essentially the administrative hub for all things in the Army, they won't send you to any outside selections within 90 days of a deployment. So I was stuck into my deployment.
Really?
That is what it is. And then on that deployment, they paired me up with a 3rd group team.
Okay.
And I was a machine gunner. I'd go out with them on these 4-day, 5-day trips, and this team was amazing. I would ask every dumb question that I could think of, and they would cycle through and just sit next to me.
Really?
I'd ask them, in SEER school, I heard that they can break a major bone.
Yeah.
Or 2 minor bones or something like that. There's just the dumb stuff that you hear in the barracks. And they would, I'm like, no, that's not true. And this is what it's like. Or, hey, what's selection like? Or what's it like really for this or for that? Or what's free fall like or whatever. And they would just treat me like the retarded young brother and just answer any question that I had.
That's cool.
And I went out with them multiple different times. And then their team sergeant was killed. Anthony Yost, who... I knew him then. I've actually stayed in contact with his family. He's a giant in 3rd group, really within our regiment. And it kind of solidified that that's where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing how his team reacted, because we had lost guys in our platoon and we reacted, harshly. But the way that their guys came together, and you could tell that was a family. It wasn't a bunch of guys that work together and they go and they do things. This was
Yeah.
They're brothers. And so I dropped my packet to go to selection shortly after I got back from the deployment and graduated the Q course in November of 2009.
So what was how was selection for you? What was that like?
I was playing hockey for the U.S. Army Alaska team.
Yeah. So you were in good shape.
It wasn't that big of a deal to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to be physically fit to finish selection. It just makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
You know, it's similar. If you're not in shape, you can go hunt anywhere you want. It's just,
right.
You're going to miss tracks. You're going to miss a whole lot of signs. You're not going to get there quickly. You're not going to be as sharp. The more in shape you are, the far easier it is. You can be dumb and not quit and maybe get picked up. But I didn't think it was terribly difficult. Then moved on to the Q course, went straight through on everything. Met a lot of people that I'm still really good friends with. And I noticed a big difference between the guys that were coming to SF and the guys that I was in the infantry with.
Really?
In the infantry, I didn't like a lot of the guys I worked with. They're worried about things I wasn't worried about. And that's not a shot at any of them. I just had a different mindset.
Yeah.
You know, I said I was in the mountains all the time. I was either out hunting, out climbing. I was testing out Army gear. I remember digging a snow cave, you know, and trying out my Army stuff on the Chena River in the middle of January. Nothing that's smart, but it's what I was interested in. And the guys that I would go to, was in the Q course with would say, hey, do you want to go into the mountains out in the Uwharrie Forest and try out this survival thing?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and that's what we would do is we would just go out, and it felt like I was like, man, these are the guys that I'm meant to hang out
surrounded
with.
by your people.
And it stayed that way. You know, I've met some people that I'll be friends with for the rest of my life. You know, I've met people that I absolutely do not like,
right,
and that don't like me, and that's completely
well. There's a segment of, I kind of use the analogy too, like with cops, right? Like, yeah, there's some bad cops, but there's, in general, to me, if you want to take a group of people as a whole, most cops are going to be pretty damn good people.
Yep.
You know, and but it's a segment of society, right? I don't care if it's professional athletes, if it's just roofers and framers, or if it's freaking cops or people in the military. There's going to be bags of shit.
Yeah.
And every it's just statistics. Like there's just going to be a few, but it does seem like the harder you do something, the harder something is to do, that percentage is going to drop, and there's going to be more and more good people that are involved in those things.
Absolutely. And the military probably has, I don't know, this might be inaccurate, this is just my opinion, might have a higher percentage of people that you won't like in a given profession just because we need the bodies. You know, when it comes to the military, we need people to run into the grinder. The one thing the military does really well is it takes away your sense of identity and makes you work as a team towards a goal. And what that goal is not up to you. It's generally not politically oriented. The orders that you're given are for something that's, tangible. Hey, I need that hill taken, or we need to secure this thing, or you have guard from this time to this time, whatever it is. We need the bodies to fill it. And at the end of the day, if the military doesn't have the bodies, the things that we were talking about at the beginning of this don't happen. Every country on the planet wishes that they had what we have.
Right.
And it takes a strong military. And we can debate what budgets are for and what our stances and all that kind of stuff are. But at the end of the day,
have a budget?
Oh, well, money's not real, but
You just printed it.
Yeah, that's the way it seems.
Yeah. So what's the difference? And I'm not a veteran, didn't serve, and so I just blatantly ask questions because I just don't know on some of this stuff. But like, what's the difference between all the groups? You hear like 4th group, 2nd group, 7th group. What does each? Because I know even like with the SEALs, right? SEAL team, 4 versus 6, and all these, they have kind of more like specialties that they tend to focus on. What are the difference in their groups in the Army?
So the U.S. Army Special Forces focuses on being regionally aligned. So each group, so you have 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 10th, and then there's 2 National Guard groups. They're organized against an area of responsibility, an AOR. So I'm in 10th group. We're aligned against Europe. So everybody in our unit speaks a foreign language that has to deal with a European interest. 3rd group deals with Africa. 1st is Asia. 5th group's the Middle East. 7th is South America. I think that's all of them.
Yeah. And do you guys occasionally bounce from group to group?
You can. It's not unheard of. It's a little bit more difficult because we do get tailored. It's tough to use a Mandarin speaker in South America.
Right.
Can they be used? Yeah. But generally you stick with your group.
Yeah.
And you can't switch. There are different reasons too. You see a lot of guys just take on another language. They'll go back to our schoolhouse at Fort, I guess it's Fort Liberty now, because that bothered people.
Yeah.
So they'll go back there, and then during it, they'll say, hey, I would like to switch and stay here. But generally it's not because they don't want to be in their group. Usually it's a family thing. They'll say, hey, my wife is an actual professional. She has a job with this organization, and I need stability.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And they'll say, all right, yeah, we'll switch you to here because of this thing. It's, as far as military units go, it's pretty solid in the way of being able to go somewhere and live there.
Okay.
And come back to it, as opposed to the conventional military where they say, well, hey, you're going to Italy. Oh, now you're going to, Fort Campbell, and then you're going to Washington, and you really don't get much of a choice. You might get an extension. You can do a stabilization for a little bit, but they generally don't care what you want to do because it doesn't matter to them that much.
Yeah, we have a family member that was just here the other day visiting on a little vacation in conventional Army, and he's getting ready to change, and he's quite frankly not sure where he's going to go.
Yeah, you don't know.
So
we at least know, 10th group, we know we have one of two realistic locations. You can go back to the schoolhouse, or you can go to Germany to our 1st Battalion. That's it.
Yeah.
Unless you switch groups or you get a one-off assignment, if you're a diver and you head down to Key West, Florida, or you're a free fall instructor and you head down to Yuma, Arizona. But for the most part, your assignment, unless you get a random one-off, is one of those two places.
Yeah.
And a ways out for the most part that you're going.
Where was your first overseas deployment?
India, oddly enough.
Really?
As a young private, I got told that I'm going on the first non-special operations trip to India since 1955. We went in March of 2004. And man, you want to talk about having an earth-shattering, reality check. Iowa boy growing up, we didn't travel a lot as a family. And we went in there and we're watching people eat dogs. We're living with people that had never seen a white person before, are literally walking up and they're grabbing skin and being like, what is this? This is weird. And they're eating roots that make their teeth red, and just a completely different culture.
Did you just love it?
I did.
Yeah. Just cause part of why you wanted to get out of Iowa was to go see the world. So damn, that's being definitely thrown into something complete. It'd be not too big of a shock to go to Germany.
Yeah.
Right. Or France or something like that.
And you're around a lot of Americans there. We didn't. We lived on the 7th or 9th Gurkha, which is their special operations. We lived on their base. We started off in Calcutta. We had our own guards that took us around to the bazaars and just watching.
Were you just helping do some training there with those guys?
It was a joint training thing. So we attended the counterinsurgency and jungle warfare school before, this really became, I guess it's a bigger thing now, but that's not our AOR. So I don't deal with India.
Yeah.
But going there and attending this course and doing it with their guys. And I remember we finished this training event, and we're coming down the hill. We had hit a machine gun position, they shoot at us and we're bounding and clearing through. And we get to the actual machine gun. And as a U.S. service member, anytime we deal with, an enemy shooting at us in terms of training, it's always blanks. The blank adapter on that. This was a live machine gun. They were just shooting into a hole in the ground.
Oh, shit.
And I remember going up and I opened up the feed tray cover because I was going to clear it as we were going through. And there's live rounds sitting on the tray, and there's just a hole in the ground in front of me. And I was completely taken aback that I was like, hold on, wait a minute. That's live ammo. Yeah, I almost lost it there.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and the differences in cultures. I'm a private first class at the time. I understand the principles of patrolling. I know what we do when we come into a patrol base. So we come in and we set in security and we start doing weapons maintenance, and we're getting a little bit of time for changing your socks out and and eating and this kind of stuff. And we look over and the Indians are starting a fire, and we're like, you can't start a fire. This is a patrol base. Like, fires are not allowed. And they're like, well, how are we going to have tea? We have to drink tea. It's just a complete culture shock. And I soaked up all of it. I absolutely loved it. It was a dang good time.
Yeah. I saw, I never, went and worked in any of these countries, but, when I was a lineman for the power company and working on power lines, we would see videos, and some of the Instagram pages and whatnot I followed also showed videos and whatnot of guys in other countries doing line work. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's no different in the military. You see things when you're you know, as highly trained as we are and proficient, the equipment we have, like everything that we have, the education, all that stuff combined together makes an amazing, effective force. It's no different on, like, say, a power company side with a lineman, right? And we have all this training, apprenticeship, you know, senior leadership, all the way down through to just the grunts on the ground doing the work and whatnot. And you learn, you've got also all this amazing equipment and rubber gloves and all this safety stuff, right? And OSHA and all that stuff. And then you see videos and pictures of how guys do line work in other countries. And it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, a forklift lifting a forklift with a guy on the top of the
standing
forks.
on something metal. He's wearing a pair of leather gloves and he's doing something and like literally like sparking wires together and shit. I mean, just mind-boggling. Of course, they die at a horrific rate. But they just another guy steps in his place the next day. And in fact, a ton of our equipment, when OSHA came out with some fall restraint regulations the year after I turned out as a journeyman, when I did all my apprenticeship stuff, I could still climb a power pole with just a belt, just a strap. Well, if you cut out, you spur the fur as much as you can, but you're sliding down that pole all the way to the ground until you get your hooks back in.
Right.
Well, they came out with fall restraint stuff, so if you cut out and you drop, that stuff grabs and you don't actually skate the pole all the way down.
Right.
And we hated it. We loved the way we did it, but the way we did it was more dangerous, but allowed you more freedom of movement on the pole. We would unbelt and free climb, so we weren't belted in. All that became illegal after I turned out. So all of our equipment was illegal, but they sent a ton of that stuff off to other countries because what we deemed illegal and unsafe was cutting edge, like the best stuff ever. Right. Crazy.
We often, we'll be out doing some kind of training. We'll get stuck in our own mindset because we get spoiled. They'll be like, oh my goodness, we only get this much ammo, or I can't believe we had to come out here and do this. Like, I could have been so much more productive if I had this. And then you'll do a trip to another country and you'll be working. I was in West Africa in 2013, and we're working with the Senegalese Special Forces Company, and they're pretty spot on. These guys they're pretty good shooters. They're intelligent. They're motivated. They pick things up, and the thing is they wanted to do the job.
Sure.
And we're having a moment with them where we're like, oh man, like I wish these guys would do this or they would do that. And then we watch their airborne company come rucking out, something like a 12-mile ruck out to the range to shoot 6 rounds and ruck back. That's all their ammo that they had for the year was 6 rounds.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought to myself, like, no, what can I do with my life if I get 6 rounds a year?
Yeah.
Like, imagine you were getting ready to go hunting and that's all you've been able to fire 6 rounds a year ago in your gun.
Right.
You don't know if the thing is even still zeroed,
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you also saw from an equipment standpoint, just even like maybe the lack of quality of boots or clothes, rain gear.
Well, it's usually not
bags.
standard. I was in 21, I was in Latvia. I was doing my first free fall jump master duties. And for the U.S. military and most of our major partners, and this is Poland, England, Germany, France, if we're going to do something with them, all of their soldiers have the same thing across the board. And it is, all right, that's what they have. And we can plan off that. And I remember looking at the Ukrainians, and I said, well, hey, what are you guys jumping? What do you have? And the first guy, he said, well, I have a 110 square foot chute, which is a tiny sport chute. You're not doing a thing with that military-wise.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I can plan off that. Then I looked at the next guy and I was like, okay, what's your biggest chute? And the guy was like, oh, I have a 360 square foot, which is what we jump. And I was like, wait a minute, what's the difference here? And they had such a variance, and you looked at their chutes and it was whatever parachute they could get.
Really?
It had nothing to do with what their military could provide them. It was just, hey, this is what we have available. Go jump this. Which, if you don't have the same stuff across the board, what can we train on?
Right.
If this guy's shooting a 9mm and that guy's shooting a 45, and this guy, he's shooting a 7mm, and then that guy has a 338, we can't prep anything truthfully on training across the board. And then if your logistics can't keep up with it, so when we work with them, we find a lot of guys that have the heart to really want to do things. And we found that with the Ukrainians. We found that with almost every European country that isn't call it an Eastern Bloc country, if you will, that doesn't have the budget that we do, or the African countries, or even the Middle Eastern countries. You find a lot that want to do it, but when you can't put the money behind it, you can't standardize what there is, you can't come up with an SOP, if you will, because, well, that's going to change out. Well, these guys might have AKs today, and then tomorrow, well, M4s showed up, but then we don't have all the right ammo for the M4s because that didn't come in yet.
Yeah.
And it just really throws a wrench in what we're trying to do with them. So it's a lot of on-the-spot creativity of, well, let's have the M4s act as a machine gun today.
Couple of buddies of mine that are SEALs, we talked about, Green Berets, SEALs, guys, you guys are like the poster child, right, for the military, and everybody looks at the Green Berets and the Navy SEALs and whatnot as the most badass dudes in our military, and the reason that we're so powerful and we're so great. And a lot of those guys said, what we do that's so great that makes everyone else so great is our logistics.
Yep.
Like our logistics, all the people that, oh, what do you do in the military? Like, oh, I'm in supply. And it's like, I've actually had guys like tell me like, well, I was just in supply. Like I wasn't a big deal. And it's like, actually, it's a huge deal because we actually even look at like how Russia, failed going across Ukraine, like literally running out of fuel.
Yep.
And like, I don't care how badass you are.
Doesn't matter.
If you don't have bullets or fuel to drive or fly somewhere, now you're, more than average capable dude, but without your tools.
Doesn't matter.
I mean,
yeah. A friend of mine, Nick Lavery, I don't know if you've had him on. He is one-legged guy, only active duty soft guy to return to combat with an above-the-knee amputation, passed dive school after it.
Wow.
When he got his leg shot off by a PKM, they actually gave him the wrong blood. He coded on the flight twice to Shank. They put him on a C-17, and they ended up saving his life. You put that against a country like Russia that on its own border can't fuel its own vehicles.
Right.
When it's not like the rail lines were taken up behind them and the roads were all completely blown up and the ones forward of it were gone. They just couldn't. They couldn't feed their own people. The logistics of the U.S. military and the capability to airlift things from place to place is astounding.
It is.
When you look at it from that standpoint, you look at our budget, you say, okay, I got it. Like, I know we spent more than like the next 26 countries or something like that.
Right.
But what we can do on the world stage, what we can project with that capability of putting C-17s on the ground, multiple of these planes to put whatever we want. The president flies with like half a dozen of these planes just to put his motorcade out. It's pretty stinking impressive. Yeah,
it's very, very impressive. And that's really what makes us such an imposing force for sure. So what was your, what was some of the most fun, like what was one of the most enjoyable deployments that you had? And that sounds like a weird question, but like, whether it's a country or the work that you got to do, a place that you came back from a deployment and you were like, that was incredible. That was a blast.
That's a tough one. I've been around for a bit. I'm at 20 years now. I've been in SF for almost 14 years. And they've sent me a lot of different places to do a lot of different things. And I think you could really separate deployments and training trips and whatnot up into, this was really fun because of the camaraderie that I have, and this is really fun because of the opportunity that I got. And they're not always the same thing. In 14, I was back in Senegal, Africa, and the Senegalese gave us dirt bikes.
Wow.
And we were working with a different unit in that country, and they were going hit targets all around Dakar. And I mentioned that I could ride a dirt bike, and they gave us dirt bikes, and they said, well, hey, go be the lead for the convoy and fly into traffic circles and stop traffic and then catch up to us. And so you have this 40-car long convoy that we are flying in and out of. This was not on any risk assessment. We didn't send this up that we did this. This was just Green Berets doing Green Beret stuff and flying through that place. And they're like, for the rest of the trip, they're like, you guys just keep the bikes. We'll get them back to you from when you leave. So they gave us dirt bikes to explore West Africa on when we weren't training. And the opportunity to do that is absolutely amazing. So I taught half the team how to ride then. We went around and just did, ridiculously fun stuff.
Yeah.
And within reason. We weren't hitting motocross tracks or anything like that, but having a lot of fun exploring. But then on the flip side of that, recently I got back from Norway, and we were working with a unit up there north of the Arctic Circle. We got dropped off, and we spent 3 days climbing a mountain to get to a place to drop a bomb. We did the first F-35 drop up there, and man, that sucked. That sucked a lot. We all had 100, 110-pound packs. We couldn't use sleds to pull anything. Snowshoes wouldn't work. We couldn't use our skis.
Why is that?
The angle of the terrain it wasn't conducive to us. So there wasn't enough snowpack to keep the sled in the correct angle from where we started. So we would have been trying to pull these sleds over deadfall, or just on dirty rocky ground that would have slowed us down. And by the time we got to elevation where all the snow was, it was too late. We weren't going to drag them up that. So we just went with heavy packs.
But why not snowshoes? Why didn't you pack snowshoes?
We packed them. We ended up using them at the very top.
Okay.
When we got up there, or
once you got up into snowpack,
way up there, we finally got a chance to use them. But there's a point where we're just post holing with these bags on, and did it suck. But there's this tipping point where you go from this is terrible and I don't want to do this anymore to what's next. What else is going to add to this story? Right. And it just becomes this switch. And I've seen it a lot in special operations compared to my time in the infantry, where you just go like, all right, yeah, what else are you going to throw at us?
Well, it is amazing to me thinking about how quickly in just a couple of years, how quickly the theater has changed from, it's changed a couple times between like the terrain of Iraq and then into Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, obviously, that's another country that's amazing I've never been there, but like you see all the photos from, hot and desert type conditions to like the most epic mountains on the planet.
Oh, you could set up a ski resort there in a different in a different reality. That place would put a lot of the, put Monarch to shame or Breck.
I think Andy Stumpf says it's the most beautiful place he's ever been. Yep. Like looking out at some of those mountains, flying around helicopters or in planes and seeing the country that he saw over there, he's just like, it's beyond epic. It's just unbelievable.
It's a surreal place because, you would be knowing that you're getting ready to go into a firefight, and you would be, in Kunar, in Nangarhar or whatever, and you'd be in these mountains and you'd be looking around and you're like, man, I kind of wish I wasn't getting ready to do this in this time right now, and that I could just sit here and take all of this in, because it is a gorgeous country.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting how fast, we've changed from, desert type combat and that kind of stuff to like what's happening now with Russia, Ukraine, and the focus more turning towards, you look at the difficulties of Ukraine with winter and mud season and all of that, and trench type warfare. I mean, a few of the Instagram pages I follow that I feel like I get better news from than the actual news. It's also the other thing that's actually mind boggling about, we definitely saw media and stuff like on the invasion of Iraq, and we saw media that was in bed with you guys over in Afghanistan and whatnot. But now it's, what we really didn't see of much with that was actual like cell phone footage then being uploaded. Yeah. And I think a lot of that's because like Taliban and whatnot weren't necessarily having Instagram pages. They were, or at least I wasn't seeing them. But like with Ukraine, like you're seeing daily videos being uploaded by dudes in a trench, like actively fighting trench warfare, World War II version, World War I and II version trench fighting.
When the Iraq war kicked off, there was what was that, like live wire, whatever it was, that you could go in and you could see, this guy was killed here and this IED went off and, here's dead bodies. It was a young man that had never seen any of that. You're trying to soak that up because you're just generally interested in like, well, what does death actually look like? Not they've been, embalmed and they're in a casket, but what does it actually look like? But the cell phone technology really wasn't there yet. The data networks definitely weren't. And now, man, we're like, I just saw that video that the Russian trying to surrender to a drone. Like just that in general. Yeah. Like we're watching a video from a drone, which didn't exist when we went to war in Iraq or Afghanistan. They were coming around, but not somebody running a DJI with a GoPro that's now uploading it from, on a LTE from his laptop. And then knowing that we're at a place where that guy can look at that drone and know, all right, that's my enemy, and they're getting ready to do something, and I don't want to be a part of that.
Well, there's a ton of drone videos on these pages where these guys are in trenches and they're engaging with a tank or something like that, and then they're dropping, small explosives off of these drones right into these freaking trenches on these guys.
I think we're in a place, in World War I, when we went to trenches, it was because a couple things had been invented that we hadn't gone to war with. We had been at, in ranks, this gentleman thought, which blows my mind to think like, wait, you just want me to stand across from somebody and they're going to shoot at me and I'm going to shoot at them and then we're going to reload and do it again that doesn't make any sense. Well, then the machine gun was invented, and then we had real artillery that got invented. And those two things alone, well, I don't want to be out in the open anymore because that machine gun will take all of us down.
Right.
So they dug in and they kind of figured it out, and then, then the tank comes in, and the airplane with the ability to drop bombs, and then chemical warfare. I think we're in a very similar place as far as warfare goes right now, because there's this digital side that we don't really know what to do with, and then the drone side, and we don't know where the drone thing's going to end.
No, and it's literal. It's actually kind of mind-boggling to me that it's still happening with trenches and that stuff, because it feels like we're right on the verge of wars really becoming video games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, the Americans have been playing the video game war stuff for a while now with drones. I mean, that's a ton of what was involved with
we had
Afghanistan and Iraq.
They put controllers in some of the vehicles for the remote control gun systems. It was just an Xbox controller.
Yeah.
And man, those things, I would hate to be targeted by that, because it can do so many different things on a whim, from changing how it's looking at you to changing how it's aiming. And it's just some kid.
Yeah. And I had an employee here that, he ran drones. Once he was a corpsman, but once he got out, went back contracting, ran a drone and did that stuff. And a lot of it was like surveillance type stuff, following one dude around and whatnot. But like, he was telling me the capabilities of how far they can see and what they can see. And he was, running stuff where they were calling in, birds doing drops and stuff, and he was directing all that stuff, or whatnot from his drone, and putting together those target packages and whatnot for guys.
Ridiculous. And the speed at which it's changing, this is where special operations in the future is really gonna make its money, I think, just because we have the ability of being in small teams, small units, to shift on the fly and say, wait, that's the SOP change, and we don't have to worry about it going down from a brigade or a division of them saying, this is the new SOP, make sure, the E4 and, 3rd Brigade, 2nd Battalion, Alpha Company, 4th Platoon,
right,
knows what this is. It's, hey, make sure the teams know this, and it gets put out, and we have guys that lean forward so hard on this stuff and want to know, because that's generally what they're interested in. The same way that I was interested in going and climbing those mountains, you have guys that's what they want to do. They look at the drone stuff and they say, man, this is really cool. Or firearms, the guys that they nerd out on ballistics beyond what, myself as a Cat 1 rated sniper can say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is where we're going to sit in, and this is what we're going to place this shot. They're reading into it far more. And it's awesome that we have that in the special operations community, the ability to sit back and say, wait, what do you say about this?
Yeah.
Hey boss, can we do this? Okay. Yeah. Hey, we're going to do that instead.
Yeah.
Is where we're going to make our money in the future.
I think. It's mind boggling. The thing that strikes me, and I can't help but watch some of it, because it terrifies me, because it feels like, we're so lucky with our country where we are placed geographically. We basically have U.S. North, which is Canada, and then we've got Mexico, which we somewhat control, but could control if we need to control.
Yeah.
So we're so isolated, but what's crazy to me is Ukraine was a really, somewhat of a first world country, and people living lives a lot like we are, not as fortunate, not as wealthy and whatnot in general, but like still a functioning society with these paved roads. And you see these guys in these trenches dug in next to a paved road on a countryside that was absolutely gorgeous and perfectly safe 2 years ago to drive. And I think to myself, like, that could be you next to a road in Denver.
Right.
Like, it's terrifying to me how fast, things could potentially go south if people had the ability to actually land on our shores. And really, I've talked about it with, I don't know what the capabilities are at all with, like with EMPs. And once you take out the power system and, being a lineman and seeing kind of what happens when people are out of power for 4 or 5 days, if you had the ability to knock out the entire country of power, and now your banking doesn't work, your gas pumps don't work, your cell phones, so there's no communication, cell phone towers aren't working. So now we have a panicked population with no ability to communicate, no ability to hear a message from the government about what's happening, even if it wasn't a giant emergency, if it's perceived to be an emergency. And then if a force actually does have the ability to land on shores and start working its way through the country, like you can actually play out a scenario where your dug in trenches defending your freaking home against
your farm,
foreign invader. It's mind boggling,
yeah.
you know. It's and watching those videos and whatnot, and you know, we get this false sense. My kids have never had video games, but you see these you know, modern whatever these warfare games are and whatnot, and they make war look, and even the movies make war look, you know, exciting and whatever. You know, they what do you call it? Like glorify it, right?
Yep.
And then you see these poor bastards in a muddy trench in Ukraine with their weapon just caked in mud, and they're in there and they're fighting somebody that's 50 feet away.
Yep.
You're shooting at a tank. You know, you're seeing tanks blast guys in a trench from 50 feet away, 100 feet away. And you can actually see through those cell phone videos what real war actually looks like in that situation, and it's absolutely terrifying.
We do glorify it. And in some ways, you know, we kind of have to keep people interested in wanting to come into this. And the past 20 years, we've glorified special operations.
Right.
You know, both wars have been, you know, Iraq started off conventional, and then it was kind of guerrilla-ish, if you will. And Afghanistan was always a special operations type mission. And as we glorify it, we forget about all the things that go into that because the movies don't show the long movements. They don't show, well, hey, that firefight happened and it was really cool and they did some great things, but they were there for 5 days waiting. And like, you'll never know boredom the way that you will sitting in a sniper hide for days on end. That's excruciating boredom. But I had a friend, he was put in for the Medal of Honor. His team sergeant was killed. He's defended the body, killed 20 some people on ISR. His team took 7 hours. They had to fight through to get to him. They finally did danger close, got to him. He was knocked out twice, black on ammo. And when he sat down and he was telling us the story, hey, let's sit down and have a couple drinks. And he told us the whole thing. And we're sitting there and we're just dead quiet looking at him. And he's like, see, this is why I don't tell the story, because nobody has anything to say. And I was like, dude, what do we say to that?
Right.
There is no, like, a movie would be made and it would be amazing.
Right.
But to guys that have gone through it, we're like, I no desire to ever get that. And he's like, you know, I got a piece of tin for the worst day of my life.
Right.
And the American, you know, media complex, the entertainment complex, if you will, would take that and turn that into just this blockbuster.
Glorified
That would be amazing, and people looking and be like, man, that's what I want to do. But the guy that lived it, you know, and thankfully I've never been put in a situation where I've had to do that. Mm-hmm. You know, I've been in plenty of firefights, but I've never been in one where it's just myself for 7 hours.
Right. Right.
And seeing that, I don't have a desire for that. You know, and I think every young man coming into the military wants that kind of like bravado. Like, yeah, look at me, look at these medals on my chest. But then you meet the guys that have those, that have the Distinguished Service Crosses or, you know, multiple Silver Stars, and like, no, that was not worth it.
And what's crazy to me about what I watch over there is I know there's also some of those guys in Ukraine that actually are very highly trained and very capable, that trained alongside our people. But when you take away the logistics and communication and all that stuff, and if all I did was stick you in a trench, you know, with a weapon and a backpack, and that's really all that you have for support is just a bunch of magazines.
So it's the Barry Sanders argument. You know,
yeah,
arguably
right.
the greatest running back ever, but he never had anybody to back him up. So what does it turn into?
Right.
You know, cool moves, and he gets some first downs, but they just keep losing.
Yeah. So it's crazy, and it's why I'm so adamant about even just being self-sufficient. I'm not a crazy prepper and whatnot, but like Mike Glover was on my podcast here last week, and we talked a lot about you know, just being self-reliant, self-sufficient in your own country. If you do lose, let's say you do lose power for a month or 2 months, and it's January and it's 0 degrees, or, you know, it's July and it's 105 wherever you live, and you're out of power for a month with zero communication, and you can't get fuel, you basically are going to stay home. Do you have the ability, you know, like that's why I put a wood stove in my house when I built it. If I have heat and I know I have water, like in my pond or a river, right? But if I have heat, I can boil water. And I have, you know, food sources, like you can hunker down and get through
and wait
whatever.
for a while. Absolutely.
Yeah. But 90% of this country, if they lose power, 95% of this country has no heat and no water.
Yep. And we saw that in Buffalo when people knew for weeks out and that storm hit, and I forget the number of how many people died, which like, how did you not have a little something,
you
know, waiting, you know, that, okay, so you don't have heat. Got it. What's the plan? And there was never well, the government's going to come save me.
Well, and what do we do if we, when we invade a country, or if we were to invade a country in a big way, the first thing you're going to do is knock out power.
Yep.
You're going to knock out power, and then potentially, utilities, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But if you knock out like a fresh water source, like every major city has fresh water sources. Well, if the pumps don't run and they only have enough fuel for generation for those pumps for 4 or 5 days, which is typical, now all of a sudden you have millions of people without fresh water.
Yep.
Forget the food part, just water.
Yeah, and that works on a country that cares about its people.
Right.
If you were to do that in North Korea, I don't think they would generally care. They'd be like, whatever, they're peasants anyways.
Right.
But if you were to do that in a modern country, the leaders would say, okay, what do you want?
Right.
Like, we're in because I don't want my people to die.
Right.
That would get to us,
Yeah.
in the U.S. But, China, I don't think China would typically care if you knocked out power to a region.
Right.
Right. That's me thinking that. Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Well, so tell me about, so you're at your 20 years. Are you going to go a little bit longer, or are you getting close to being finished up?
I think so. I've started this nonprofit, this Green Beret Racing team.
Yeah.
And finding purpose is its sole.
When
reason
did
for
you
existence.
start this?
We became nonprofit officially in October of 21.
Okay.
So we're going into our, I think this is our maybe third full year.
And what was the trigger that made you want to start that? How did that get going?
I got asked randomly by a friend if I wanted to go down to the Mid 400, largest off-road race in North America, and race it. And I was like, yeah, sure. Not knowing what it was. I'd never been into desert racing. I've never been a guy that's looked at anybody and really idolized them.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player. Got it. I'm not buying his shoes because of that reason. I couldn't name you really many people, when Ken Block died, like that sucked because I was like, man, I want to meet him. He does really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of like major stuff like that, I've never idolized or looked at people's names and been like, man, that's the guy. And same thing with race series. I'd never looked at that. And then in my previous marriage, I'd never looked at it. I put a lot of things on hold, I guess, taking care of these kids. But I took off a lot, and it was always come home and either go pursue my own hobbies or spend time with my family.
Right.
And I like to think that I'm a pretty good dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I put a lot of things on hold. Well,
is he a good dad? Yeah,
oh
kind
my
of.
goodness.
Yeah,
Can we kick
like
her out of here? Can we get security?
My kids would say the same thing. They'd bust me real good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I decided that when I was going on there to race, I knew nothing about it. And next thing you know, I'm in the cockpit. We'd never driven this car. Someone else paid for our entry. We're in someone else's gear. Someone else is running the pit. And we were in a thing called the Military Challenge. So there's like 8 other teams, all military oriented, one from each branch. And we ended up taking third. And mainly because everybody else broke their vehicles, not because we were some savants of driving.
Right.
But we're sitting down to breakfast the next morning, not understanding what we had just accomplished, because we heard people say, oh man, if you finish this race, this is pretty impressive. And there we'd finished it, and we'd, taken third in our little class, and we're sitting there, and I'm sitting across from my co-driver, and he's a very accomplished man in my eyes. We'd been on one of the previously mentioned Africa trips. He was with me. We worked a small mission together with the Senegalese Special Forces Company, just him and I. I'd been married for 23 years. Kids are either in college or in the military. He has his own business. He works for Glock. Like, I looked at him and I was like, man, this guy has it together. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me, deadpan, says, man, I didn't realize I needed that. And
really?
I'd heard that before from guys that had gotten out. And saying, man, I need this. I need something like this, whether it's going to the VFW or just showing up to team parties that they're not on anymore, and saying, man, I need this community. So I really started thinking about it. I was like, well, maybe we bring desert racing in for everybody. And then I realized how expensive desert racing is, and said, well, let's start on something smaller.
Yeah.
So I went and I bought a dirt bike, and I got into dirt bike racing and started meeting people and bringing them in. Starting talking to street bike racers and drag racers, and like, man, all right, maybe it's motorsports. Maybe this is it. And then a guy came to me and he was like, I do ultra marathoning. And I was like, good for you. I don't do that. But how can we help?
Right.
or how can I help? And I loosely formed an organization. I was like, let's just make it a group of dudes that kind of gets together. And then one day I got a call about jiu-jitsu. And I was like, I don't have a jiu-jitsu team, but I can find one. And I reached out and I got a couple guys together, and, we got them geese and we got them going. And this thing slowly started to take a life of its own, where it went from, well, let's get guys into motorsports to let's find a passion for you so that when you leave a team, when you leave service, whenever a life-changing event happens, you have something to lean on. When you hang it up and you're getting to know your wife again, you're trying to rebuild relationships with your kids.
Right.
You're trying to figure out what your profession is. You're trying to find a reason to keep working out. Let's give you a reason to at least wake up in the morning. That's it. And since then, we've brought on actually my Denali team. I sent 4 people up Denali. They just came off the mountain 2 days ago. I sent a guy up Everest last year. I have ultramarathoners. I have guys running Spartans.
Really?
We do drag racing, street racing, MotoGP, dirt bike. Really, we don't say no, because at the end of the day, it's not my place to tell you what you love. If you come up to me and you say, hey man, I want to find something, and I tell you, well, let's go run a marathon. That's going to fix you. And you say, well, my knees are hurting. I'm 50 years old. I don't want to run a marathon. What are my other options if that's all I can offer? So I've decided to not offer anything outside of support and community.
Yeah.
So you come to me and you say, hey man, I want to get into something. Okay. What interests you? I had one guy, he's on his 4th sport. He started off, he did CrossFit, got hurt, got into jiu-jitsu, kind of liked it, got hurt. Tried dirt biking, didn't really like it. Then he did road biking, and he was like, man, if you would have told me that that's what I would have been into, then I'd have laughed at you.
Really?
And now he's into road biking. So that's the purpose of it. It's just this community of people that come together and say, what is it that you want to do? How can we support it? And can we remove the monetary barriers? Can we raise the money for that? Can I help you get gear? Can I get you connected with people that know how to do this?
How do you raise money for Green Beret Racing?
A lot of different ways, everything from selling merchandise. That's not one of our biggest ones. We get sponsors. Our desert racing team is decently successful.
Is it?
This last mint, we raised 2 razors technically. I got a pilot one. I took it up to 5th place, which was pretty cool. Another team said, hey, you got a guy with you. We need a driver. And I was able to take a Gold Star kid around for a lap in the mint. And we moved from like 13th to 5th, which was really fun for him.
That's
then we
awesome.
had dirt bikes all the next day. That's what I raced on. And it draws a lot of attention as compared to guys that want to run marathons. That doesn't look nearly as cool as a guy jumping a triple.
Right.
So we sell advertising, if you will, and then we got donations as well. So that's really the 3 different ways that we go. And we try to open it up to whatever. We'll work with you. What is it that you want to get out of us as we're growing on this platform? And as we do that, we bring on more. I brought on a Bronco rider this 2 weeks ago.
A bronc rider, you said? Really?
Yeah, 49-year-old retiring Green Beret that's like, man, my kid's getting into this, and I'm driving forward with this. And I was like, we want to be a part of it.
So do you, does it matter what branch of the military, as far as like the guys that come to you, do you take anybody? Is it just Green Berets? Is it just Army guys? Like,
It used to be just Green Berets. When I wrote the charter, I put it in there that as the director, I have a discretionary ability to bring anybody on that I want. But I didn't know how to start a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But I knew the Green Beret community. So instead of, let me start this for all the military and then dealing with a submariner, I don't know what your problems are. I'm guessing claustrophobia. You probably hit your head and you have a vitamin D deficiency. I don't know. But in trying to figure that out and then vet were you or were you not, I knew the Green Berets. So let me start there and then work on building out this organization. And as I built it out, I have 2 Marines that actively work for me now. I have 2 more Marines that have come on to help volunteer for our Vegas Torino race in August. I have Air Force guys. I have Army crew chiefs. I have an Army Ranger that likes to come out and volunteer. I've supported team spouses, retired guys, active guys, and it's really starting to grow into this thing of just community.
how many guys are on your team?
I have 9 directors under me.
Okay.
And we supported about 90, almost 90 guys last year, in somewhere around 24 different sports.
Wow.
Everything, archery, indoor skydiving. I had a guy approach me about bowling, and that's where it's at. I don't care. And,
Really?
And I saw this really come together. We were launching the Denali team at the beginning of last month. Big send-off party, and I'm watching a downhill skier talk to a dirt biker, and they are talking about jumping. oh man, hitting a jump and doing this and hucking that and this and that. And you're watching two sports that have nothing really to do with each other.
Yeah.
And guys that share a little bit of a background, laughing and joking and talking about the feeling of this when you're flying through the air doing that. Or, how do you take a turn like this? Oh, that's similar to this. And watching this community come together in a way that you probably would be hard pressed to get a clay pigeon shooter and a 3-gun shooter together to talk about the same thing.
Right.
Here we're doing it with a community of guys that are just like, man, this is what I love to do.
That's really cool. How did the Denali trip go?
So we sent 4 people. One of my crew, she made it 14 camp, and as the mountaineers say, she lost her feet. No frostbite, but she just lost feeling in it. She had AMS, acute mountain sickness. My lead climber took her down to base camp, flew her out, and then climbed for 11 hours to get back up to 14, where the other 2 guys were waiting. They made it up to 18.2, and just a huge storm hit, and they ended up running out of supplies and came off the mountain. So they just got back to Colorado. So we failed the summit, but we proved a theory. And the theory was the concept of this is not, let's just do fun stuff. Mm-hmm. It is, let me give you a purpose. When you turn your alarm off in the morning, like, are you getting out of bed with a reason? Or is it just, I'm going to go to my 9 to 5, or it's this job I don't like, or whatever. And I'm in their WhatsApp chat, and they're talking. When we started this thing 8 months ago, it was a lot of, oh, this is funny, and hey, I'm going to hang out with these guys, and I'm doing this and whatnot. And then there was a marketed change in their language. Mm-hmm. And it went from that talk to, hey, I'm reading this book, 128 Below, about the only winter summit up this mountain. I want you guys to read it because there's some really good stuff in here. Or, hey, I'm looking into this product because we get this many more calories out of it. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, I'm looking into this gear because of this and that, or I'm going to train here. And it became a very different type of dialogue that was going on. You could tell that they were focused. Yeah. And purpose is really, it's what everything is about. Like, why are you doing the thing that you're doing? If you're doing it just because it's a thing to do, well, then there's not much behind it. Yeah. But if you're walking into the gym with a purpose, it's very different. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a purpose to go to the gym, just get a Planet Fitness thing. Right. Like, go to a Globo gym. It doesn't matter. But if you have a reason to train, not work out, that's a very different thing. You're changing your diet. You're changing when you're going to sleep. You're changing who you're hanging out with. Mm-hmm. And now you have a reason. And that's what we're trying to do. The reason for becoming a Green Beret, becoming a SEAL, becoming a Ranger, or whatever, at some point you look around the people that you're with and you go, I'm worth more than where I'm at right now. My talents aren't being utilized. And then you go through the grueling, you go through BUDS, you go through, the Q course, you go through Ranger School and everything that's encompassing with that, and what the Raiders go through. And there's something to it, mm-hmm. where you're looking at the guys and you say, all right, there's only so many seats, mm-hmm. and I need to wake up and do this. Mm-hmm. Well, when we leave a team, that's gone. Your lifelong friends that you had are now looking at you saying, hey man, like, I love you, but we're out the door soon. I have to train. Right. I have to go. And you're left holding the bag going, well, wait a minute. Everything I have in my life, I put on hold. Right. A Green Beret at 22 years old goes to selection. He finishes the Q course, about a 2-year process. He's 24, takes him about 3 years on a team to figure out, all right, I know my job now. I'm now somebody that can be trusted, to be looked to. And you're a senior, if you will. Right, so he's 27. He does another 3 years or so as a senior before he gets pulled for a broadening assignment. Now he's 30, 3-year broadening assignment. He comes back, he's 33. He does another 2 years, 3 years on a team before he either promotes out or gets moved somewhere else. Now he's 35, 37. Right. He spent his entire adult life trying to do that job. Right. And then it's gone, whether by his choice or not.
Right, which is kind of what you're staring at pretty quickly.
I'm not worried, because this thing has become a purpose.
But that's what I mean. Like, you've had that career path, but what's really cool is you've had the foresight to kind of actively try to set up something to transition into. And it's really cool what you've carved out. But I've heard so many guys talk about, like, they kind of heard like, oh, I should have done this or should have done that to set themselves up, but they were just doing this thing, and then all of a sudden it ended and they had no.
Yeah. And it comes quick.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden they are you where you're at right now, but with nothing after that. Mm-hmm. And
well, I can't say that I did it willfully.
Yeah.
I remember when I was getting divorced from their mom. I'm dropping them off in the first summer that I've had with them. I have divorce papers in my passenger seat. I'm driving through West Texas. West Texas, to anybody listening, is a terrible place. Do not go. It smells terrible. There's nothing to see. It's flat.
Sounds like Montana.
Very much. Almost exact. I was wondering if I was in Montana the whole time.
Yeah.
I got tears in my eyes because the other day it's a failure.
Right.
Because how you look at it, it's a failure. And this Rob Bailey song comes on. Rob Bailey in the Hustle Standard, he comes on and he goes, I did the 9 to 5. I had the 401k, I had the house, I had the fence, I did everything I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I always thought that this feels stupid. And for some reason, I'd been listening to the song. This is workout music for me. And that hit a chord for me.
Yeah.
And I realized that everything I was driving for in my career, when I put my family on hold, wasn't making me happy.
Right.
So I made 4 goals for myself. Goals that, I wasn't trying to be the CEO of Ford, because I have no control over that.
Good, because I drive Chevy.
All right. Well, it is 2023. So the goals were I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to re-enlist. I was at like 13 years at the time, and I'm going to become a warrant officer because I already have this much time in. I might as well get more of a retirement, if you will.
Right.
And almost 2 years to the date I was walking across the stage as a warrant officer, the owner of a house. I had my own business. I had my FFL. Obviously, I had re-enlisted. And I just kind of put into the universe that I'm not going to settle for not having something better.
Right.
And 6 months after I became a warrant, I raced the Mint 400. And it started me on this path. And it wasn't by me drawing up some kind of line and block chart of saying, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then this is going to happen. It was just, I'm not going to sit there and be a statistic, a retired guy that's, had multiple marriages and, has been talking about, well, this is what my PT score was, and this is what I could squat.
Right.
I just didn't sit well with me. So I went down that path, and it's leading me to this. And it's kind of I said, it's become its own thing. The next evolution of this is the competitive design group, where I take the structure of Green Beret Racing and I say, okay, how do we get other branches involved and get them to compete against each other in a season-long championship, to where we don't just go race the Mint and then we race Vegas to Reno and then the California 300. And that was really cool and fun, and we learned some things. How about we do all of them? But we do it against the Marines, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, and I guess the Space Force is a thing now. And we get all of the DOD.
I'm not hanging their flag in my shop yet.
They're all over Colorado too.
We hung all the flags downstairs. I'm sure you saw them down there. We hung all the flags up, and somebody was like, "You gonna hang Space Force?" I'm like, "Not until they have a casualty."
Yeah.
Then I'll hang. I don't think they quite deserve to be there yet. Now, if they stop, if China hits us with an EMP and they throw more satellites up in space, and 5 days later I've got power and they save the nation, I'm going to hang their flag up.
We're in. Yeah, we'll move one of them. Yeah,
but yeah, or until like one of them blows up which hopefully doesn't happen, but one of them blows up in their own little space shuttle or something, trying to go save the world.
I don't think they have space shuttles. Elon has more space shuttles than Space Force.
They literally copied what what's the Star Wars flag or whatever, isn't it?
No, it's the Star Trek, because it's the triangle or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, is this serious? Are we serious?
Yeah, it's when you get a whole bunch of people that watch a lot of that stuff and they're like, we can make our own branch.
Yeah.
I have an idea. This is
Which actually, in all seriousness, it actually makes complete sense to have a Space Force, because it does appear to be that's where we're headed.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of our biggest threats is like what happens if they knock out military satellites or, so in all seriousness, it actually is something we should be completely focusing on, if not dumping the most amount of money into, but I'm not quite ready to hang their flag.
What's putting the cart before the horse a little bit? Your Space Force, would you go to space? Well, no. Okay, so your ground force that has aspirations of going to space. Got it.
Yeah.
So, which I think we could have done out of the Air Force, which is probably why they made them the branch that came directly out of them.
Yeah, it seems to me like it should just be, it's like the Navy SEAL of the Navy, right? Or the Green Beret of, like, isn't there like a selection they could go through in the Air Force to become
Master Chief?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we got Halo guys coming in now. Yeah. It's the direction that we absolutely should go.
For sure.
It's the highest. If you own space, it doesn't matter what aircraft are flying below you. You got them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm reading a fiction book. It's very much like a Tom Clancy type thing, where it's set, just, hey, this is a year in the future. That's called the Monroe Doctrine. And it has a lot to do later in the book about Space Force actually pulling their weight. and having planes that fly at 80,000 feet and can drop these tungsten rods that, impact with like a 500, megaton nuclear warhead type impact. And it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. It's a wonderful book. And the fact that China is now doing stuff in Cuba, that's where this entire book started, was China doing stuff in Cuba. And I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. Which boggles my mind that caught anybody by surprise. And who knows, maybe it didn't. But, Cuba and Mexico seem like absolutely wide open to, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we've been down that road.
Yeah,
so it's just like,
seen this one before.
Boggles my mind. They say history repeats itself, right? And it's just after this whole Afghanistan 20-year war, and then we pivot right around and head into Ukraine, and we start this whatever we're doing in there. And a person can debate all these different things, but I personally, just as a knife maker dude in America, like, I feel like we need to stay the hell out of a lot of this stuff until it's time to go. But then when we go, it should be like, we should be showing the world what we can make happen in 48 hours or 72 hours. Like it's the equivalent of like, wait till your dad gets home. Like, you don't want your dad to come home. Like, I'm going to tell your dad.
For all the follies of Trump and the things that I remember working with NATO partners, and they'd be like, your president said this. Like, look, I know.
Yeah.
But the getting NATO to pull their weight was amazing. The fact that we hadn't done that since the invention of NATO, that we were just, hey, we'll pay you to go and do this, is me getting them to do chores. Look, do this and you'll get this. Like, just do it so I can worry about other things.
Right. Well, look at when he came into his presidency, we were on the verge of war with North Korea. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was on the doorstep. Obama was like,
I remember.
We were, like, we were literally, I thought we were headed to some kind of a war with them. And they just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like, overnight. And I remember when they said, like, they were giving Trump a bunch of flack for going and talking to what's his face over there in North Korea. And I'm like, I could give a shit. Our president could talk to whoever, go have a chat with them, give him his little time on TV or whatever. But when the camera shut off, it's like, listen here, you son of a bitch. I just gave you your time on television. Now you're going to sit down and shut the hell up.
I so much want to be in the room when one of those conversations happen, because it can be that handshake, hey, how are you? But it was funny to watch him walk up to world leaders and grab them by the hand and yank them.
Yes.
Which was hysterical to me. But then I want to see those behind the scene ones, because like, look, we got 20 aircraft carriers on the ocean.
Right.
What are you going to do?
Right. We're going to grease you.
Yeah.
And so this is how it's going to happen. This is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to say, and this is what you're going to say. But ultimately, what's going to result is we're done hearing from you.
Yeah.
Like, sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
And it's, but those are the conversations that should be happening. And like with Trump too, same thing. I mean, it's proven a lot of what he was saying the entire time. I mean, he was absolutely getting railroaded, getting screwed, a ton of stuff. But he would also say and tweet stuff that it's just like, I'm friendly with Trump Jr. And, I never said it to him. I never texted him about it or whatever, because I'm sure he's got plenty of friends that have. But it's like, you guys, please take your dad's phone away after 9 o'clock.
There comes a point. Like,
yeah, it's like, but, it's actually the hardest job on the planet over a 4-year stretch was Kayleigh McEnany.
Oh my goodness.
She, as the White House actually, she wasn't, I don't think she did
Sarah
it for
Huckabee
4
Sanders
years.
was before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
So
you
it
had
was,
another guy. What was his name?
yeah, I can't remember.
was
But once
terrible.
Kayleigh got in, one, she's an absolute bombshell. Gorgeous gal. Mind-bogglingly smart.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And the stuff, like, she had to wake up. I can only imagine her and her husband, like, having breakfast, and she pulls out her phone as she gets out of bed and goes, oh my God.
He said what?
Yeah.
Yep.
How am I? And she not only went in, but then, like, owned the media and shut it down every day.
She'd have a binder, and it was hysterical. We went to visit the White House, and I walked in, and they're like, well, Mr. Trump's out on the course. And I was like, is this press secretary here? Like, I would like to meet her, because forget that job.
She was so good.
Yep.
So good.
Or even
so
current
prepared.
administration.
I mean, I was when Trump was, after this last election, I was like, the person, the one woman that I would truly support for president would be her. I mean, there was nobody more prepared.
Yeah.
And she was waiting for you to ask the question, and she had the answer.
Oh, it's so good. And she'd flip to the binder and she'd be like, yeah, I see your point, but on May 19th, 2017, you said this and you said this, and like, oh man.
No, she sat and really a lot of what you guys do with game planning contingencies and what's going to happen if this helicopter crashes? What's going to happen if, this truck dies, or we can't go through this gate, or these guys aren't here. Like she had all these contingencies figured out, and like you said, she could actually find them. I make notes all the time around here in my own office, and I can't find them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she's doing it on camera in front of hundreds of people that are trying to get her.
Well, there's a certain level of professionalism. It doesn't matter if we're talking sports, if we're talking military, political, whatever it is. When you see people that you're like, wow, you are a pro. It really puts you in a place where you're like, maybe I'm not that good at what I do.
Yeah.
And that's watching her do that was, man, amazing.
Unbelievable. And really in a situation, she was being put in really quite terrible situations often by her boss. Like, as much as I support him and, it's actually, I was thinking to myself of this the other day, what Biden should have done a couple years ago is pay her any amount of money to be his, because, whatever clown they've got in there doing his right now, she's trying to speak for a dead person, which I know, you can't say a lot about that as commander-in-chief, but I can say she's speaking for a dead person, or that poor gal that's in there doing whatever, and she's dumber than a bag of hammers. So it just boggles my mind.
I think just the press secretary position. One, I don't think the fact that the press secretary's name says something, because
I didn't know Obama's. Like, he was a good speaker.
It was Jay Carney.
Okay.
And he did well, but that position, you have the people that really support you, whatever political leanings they have, and they're giving the softballs. Hey, what's the president's favorite color of shoe?
Right.
And then you get to answer that. And you got the other one that will take things that were said 10 years ago and put it against something and just do that whole, like, I'm going to get you with this one.
Yeah. On both sides, doesn't matter what the president is. At least with Obama, he was a pretty safe. He wasn't going to tweet wild shit in the middle of the night. But he still had, you still have both sides. Doesn't matter what party are. You're going to have the gotcha people for sure.
For sure.
And honestly, that's their job. That we need the media, and in fact, it's what's actually missing, quite frankly, today.
Yep.
They were unfair about it with Trump and whatnot, but I would rather it be unfairly harsh than unbelievably soft.
That's the point of the media.
That's the point of the media.
You should be calling out everything.
Yeah.
And what's that show, The Newsroom? I don't know if you ever watched it. I watched like 4 episodes.
Yeah,
but their premise was essentially, hey, we're rushing to get stories out just to get to get clicks.
Yeah.
And he says, and that's wrong. So they said they were going to be this news organization that waited until they had facts. This is what we know.
Yeah.
And we're in this news cycle where it's, oh, hey, there's a giant man, kicking over buildings in New York City, and boom, they'll put it out there. And you'd be like, wait, what? There's a giant man in New York City, but the people won't follow up. And they'll be like, oh, never mind. There was a sinkhole, and where I was sitting, the guy just looked taller than he was, and he looked like he did it.
Yeah.
But that'll be buried in paragraph 20. They're just all about headlines.
Right.
And it's further dividing our country.
No, it is. And there's one side of the media that's suppressing stories, and there's other sides of media that are frankly making them up, and exaggerating things and whatnot. And I'm all about, I don't care if it's for a political figure I support or not, like, they should be going after everything that they can and trying to expose anything that's not proper, questioning, pushing them on their points, making sure that what they're talking about, they actually know what they're talking about. But, like with the Twitter files and everything that happened with Trump, I mean, the whole Russiagate stuff, like it ended up being proven that our media they were questioning and doing things, but they took it so far that they were actively suppressing or making things up, which is just...
Well, you said, agreeing on what's proper, and I don't think we can even do that.
Right.
I'm having conversations with a 10-year-old in the car that's asking me things that I didn't even know what they were when I was her age. It wasn't even a thought. Right. And they're putting me in a position as a father, which I agree with her mother on all of it. So I don't have to debate her on what we think about what this rule or that law is. But having these conversations from, like, you shouldn't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary, and they'll get the thing, I got kids in my class that are transsexual. Hold on. You don't even know what any of that means.
Right.
How are they, just the mere words that are in there, and what that whole thing is about you can't do any of that yet. How are you a thing?
Yeah, and the conversations that we're forced to have now with our kids at an incredibly early age really is driven by the access to, you know, social media and news and stuff. That like when we were kids, if we wanted to watch TV, it was generally sitting there in the room with our parents. They chose what was on, and then when the TV got shut off, my access to information was shut off. Like that was it, and there was no cell phone coverage. There was no, I mean, we didn't have phones. There were no towers there, and so parents could choose when to introduce children to certain topics. Generally, it ended up finally just being on the bus. Kids learn everything on the bus.
I learned a ton of stuff on the bus. We'd get asked questions, be like, "Oh, you know what this is? Oh, yeah, sure, of course I know what that is." No clue. Yeah, you'd have to ask other people.
You're a freshman on a bus trip with the seniors to a basketball game. You're going to learn lots of stuff on the way to school. But nowadays, you're forced to address things from 5-6 years old. On, and it depends on when you allow them to have social media. But even if you don't allow them, their friends have it, and if they're at their friend's house, it's all being discussed. They all see it. So it's crazy. It really is quite crazy. But I take it head on. We're super open, talk to them like adults, and make sure that they're hearing how we feel about it first, and they're not trying to gather it from friends. And
that's what your role as a parent is. Is look, this is how I feel about it, and this is what it is. Right. You're going to go through life, and we as parents are supposed to push our kids. Go find your limits. Go find out what you like, what you don't like. I came back from Norway, and I make them try new foods. Doesn't matter if you think you like it or not, you're going to find out if you like it. And I brought back ham paste and these jars of mackerel that were ground up, and they immediately were like, I don't want to eat that. My oldest took the mackerel to school with her just to show off to her friends that it tasted good and that she liked it.
That's cool.
And that's where we as parents get so tied into, here, get on your tablet, just leave me alone. Like, were you on your tablet yesterday? Yeah, that's a no. Even on this road trip.
And my kids have never bought them video games. They've never had a tablet. Hank, my Danny's been seeing, like, Hank was out. He's all of a sudden getting hooked on golf for some reason, just like in the last couple weeks. But he's out hitting golf balls last night till 10:30 at night, or he's out shooting his bow. My kids, if you hang out at the house, like Danny will say, my kids, we have this giant basement and they sleep in it, and that's it. Like when we're hanging out in the house, they're up in the kitchen hanging out with us at the dinner table, talking just like she's sitting here right now. And these are the kind of kids that I also raised, where when they were 10 years old, they would sit there and be quiet and be respectful for an hour while the adults were doing their thing. And that's the kind of parenting to me that, you want them involved. You want them to be able to hear things, but there's times where they need to know, like, you sit there and be quiet for a while and just listen. But then there's also times where you involve them in adult conversations and make them feel like
they're part of it. We do this in the shop, at our headquarters. We'll be tearing down dirt bikes, and guys will bring their kids. And, dogs are running around. There's nothing's really hidden there. We don't have, naked women on the walls or anything like that.
Right.
We limit profanity, but it's not hidden. And the kids they're over there, and hey, come here. Here, help me do this, do that. And then the questions start flowing, and they're hearing us talk about this. And like, well, what's that like?
Right.
Well, what are we doing this for? And it's nourishing that curiosity that kids have, but in a way that makes them feel like, hey, you're just a part of what we do.
Right.
It's not forcing, you will do this.
Right.
She did her first dirt bike race, and there was a lot more cajoling there to, hey, you got the gear on, go do it, go ride. And she got done. She's like, I want to do it again. Well, of course you do. This was a lot of fun.
Right.
But that initial push until they find something that they're hooked on. And like I said, as parents, it's our job to, what did Peterson say? Make them dangerous in a safe way. Do dangerous things in a safe way, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing terribly.
Henry asked me, because we were down in hunting camp last week, and Henry was down there, and I was talking about Hank went bear hunting last week by himself just up here. His mom dropped him off at the gate where he likes to go, and he went hiking a mountain and went hunting, and he's 15. He's by himself. And Henry actually asked me, I'm pretty sure it was you, asked me in the truck, do you worry about him when he's out there, like, doing that in the mountains by himself, getting lost? There's actually a big grizzly bear up there that was just, I have video of. So he's out in the woods completely on his own doing that. And I said, I would actually worry about him more if he was headed to town with a group of 4 friends to go to the mall.
right,
or to hang out at somebody's house. Because
Yeah.
like in that situation, I wonder what's going on, who's there, are there drugs,
Yep.
what's being said, all the things that you can imagine. There are risks, there's some risks, but also what it's teaching him in the mountains is, self-reliance, not to be scared, that you can accomplish things that, overcome fears, the whole 9 yards. And like I say, he shot a bear last year at 14 out here with his bow by himself.
Heck yeah.
He got up at 6:30 in the morning in the dark, hiked out in the dark, hunted for 3 hours, and shot a bear at 10 yards at 14 years old.
Yeah.
Now, could have something happened? Sure. But the kids that are running around with very little supervision in their cars with their friends, I think there's a lot higher risk there than there is being out in the woods fishing or hunting or doing something like that.
The same questions that we ask our kids are the same ones that were asked to us. It's never, if you're just going somewhere, hey Dad, I'm going out to do this. Okay, cool. It's who's going to be with you?
Right.
What are you doing? Do their parents know?
Right.
Is anybody else going to be there? And it's a much more, it's an interrogation at that point. Because
and I usually finish it with, don't be retarded.
Yeah. Don't do dumb stuff. Yeah.
So
we need you to do dumb stuff, but not that dumb stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's limit let's take dumb to a 7, not a 10.
Yeah.
So
boys left unchecked will absolutely do that when they're around their friends.
It's part of why we bought the vehicle. Hank bought it with his 4-H money this morning, but it's part of why I allowed him to buy that vehicle, because it's a 3-liter 6-speed Ford Ranger 1999, lacking some horsepower.
Yeah.
But all he cares about is getting a truck that can take him up into the mountains.
Yep.
And he can haul home a deer, and he can haul. And I actually like it because he can't really actually take the dumbness to a 10 with that truck. He can take it to about a 6.
Yep. That was my first couple cars. My
know.
dad didn't let me really get anything crazy. And then I got into the Army, finished selection, I bought a motorcycle. And I was smart enough to not buy a leader bike crotch rocket that would fit me. But my first cruiser, 1700cc V-twin, and I found out exactly how fast that thing would go, not really understanding anything.
Right.
Because that's what you're going to do.
Right.
And, that's, hey, let's not get you a Corvette for your first car. You know exactly where that's going to end up.
Exactly.
If you end up in a farmer's field, buried up to your hubs in mud, I can deal with that. But if you're wrapped around a telephone pole because you're doing 180 and lost control, you don't walk away from that.
Exactly. Well, wrap up here, what do you got coming up next? You got races coming up, and then also I kind of want to have you just tell us how people can find you, and just kind of see what you've got going on, I guess, with your career. Do you got another deployment coming, or?
Yep. This road trip that we're on, we're halfway through it. Get back from it, take off over to Europe, do 6-7 months over there, come back, and I'll transition into another position.
You got to be careful with that transitioning thing these days.
Yeah, I can detransition out of this one.
Okay.
Doesn't cost me any money, I don't think. And we're going to figure it out. I've asked for a couple different positions. Mm-hmm. If they give me those positions, I'll stay in. If not, I'm going to probably take full time to get the race team going.
Yeah.
And as far as what's next for the race team, Vegas to Reno is the next really big race that we have. Longest single day off-road race in North America happens from Vegas to Reno.
Wow.
That'll happen August 20th. Same day, we're also hosting a 5K race in Colorado Springs. And then shortly after that, we have an event almost every single weekend where some of our racers are doing something, but that's a marquee event where we'll send the drone pilots out and the media team, and we'll have a bunch of volunteers together to do stuff. So if they want to follow our social media, kind of watch it, that'll be a good one.
And how would a Green Beret apply to become a part of this with you?
So they can go to the website or to our social media, both of them, greenberetracing.org, or on Instagram, largest profile, monitor the box pretty often. It's just at Green Beret Racing. You'll find us, just shoot us a message, tell us what you're kind of doing. We'll get you into a separate chat, start talking to you, kind of figure out what you're for, what you're going against. We are small, so we don't have unlimited budgets to throw at things. However, we can at least link you up with somebody to do things, if not help you get into events.
Sure. Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being up here. Stay safe. You're doing a good job raising these little girls.
Don't say that in front of her. She's going to hold that against me now.
Yeah. Can you keep him out of trouble on the rest of this trip? Sure. Yeah. That's a big job.
Yeah, good luck. She's going to be sleeping. You should have seen her drooling on the way in here.
You looked sleepy when you came walking up to the shop this morning. My guess is you slept in the truck on the way over here. Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
It was good, man. I appreciate you having us on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. Appreciate it. And, yeah, we'll look forward to, let's do this again sometime.
Right on. Thanks, Josh.
All right.